Then, what about our grandchildren, Jessica and Miles? Am I supposed to raise them alone?
I ask seriously, to which my husband, Nate, laughs. Of course. Those kids were such a hassle. Nate says with a grin, then starts to fill out the divorce papers right in front of me. Standing beside him, Kristen is all smiles. Just as Kristen lets go of Nate's shoulder, she comes closer to me and whispers in my ear, "I'm taking your rich husband." Frozen, I watch as Nate finishes signing, then slides the divorce papers and pen towards me. Trembling, I sign the papers. Look at her, shaking because she's losing her husband. They laugh as I manage to finish signing. Now I can marry Kristen. Yay! I'm so happy. I watch silently as the two of them walk out arm in arm. Then, Jessica tightly grabs my hand. When I look at her, she's smiling mischievously. Grandma, you're better off. Because that person. Jessica starts to point with her free hand, but I quickly stop her. Then, I ask Jessica. Jessica, when did you realize? Huh? I've known for a long time. I give a wry smile, squat down, and hug Jessica and Miles. I am Isabel, 54 years old. Life has been tough, but this is undoubtedly the hardest time. How could this happen? Owen, why? It happened all of a sudden. My eldest son, Owen, and his wife, Louise, were out shopping. They were hit by a truck that was looking elsewhere and left this world too soon. Owen, whom I've always cared for from afar since he got married, could only meet once a year but was my beloved son. His wife, Louise, was also lovely and a truly good person. The most cruel part was that the couple had children. The eldest, Jessica, a 9-year-old girl. The youngest, Miles, a 3-year-old boy. Suddenly orphaned, the two had nowhere to go and came to our house. It was supposed to be a place for the grandchildren to find some solace. But I was a bit worried. Because in this house lived Nate, who was far more problematic than any child. Nate was a personification of selfishness. I still wonder why I married him. If anything, his income was the only good thing. But he wouldn't let me spend freely, so it wasn't much of an attraction. If I could talk to my past self, I'd want to ask why I married him, but I probably just gave in. The first day the grandchildren arrived. They looked anxious. Understandable. They only visited the house about once a year. Regardless of Nate, I intended to cherish them, but we hadn't met many times. Especially Miles, whom I've only met 3 times. It was unreasonable to expect them to adjust right away. Nate insisted. Send them to a facility. I hate kids, refusing stubbornly. I've hardly ever argued with Nate. But I couldn't give in on this. They are Owen's legacy. More than anything, I want to be with these kids. Huh. I'm not going to take care of them. I had no expectations from Nate, who hadn't done anything even when Owen was a child. At first, it was tense, but I was impressed by the children's adaptability. They gradually started to feel at home. Grandma, this is delicious. Oh, is it? That's great. Eat up. Me too. I'll eat a lot. Yes, yes. I'm so happy. It was truly heartwarming to see them getting comfortable and lively. My lifelong friend Kristen said, "You're too kind." I could never do that. But it wasn't hard. They were just too adorable. I'm sorry to Nate, but this time, I had to prioritize the children. Before the kids came, Nate was always the center of my attention. Naturally, he didn't take it well and was frequently irritable towards me. Hey! Seconds! Hey! Sorry. Miles spilled some water and I can't leave him. Can you serve yourself? Huh? Leave that for later. I'm the priority. The spill was just water, but Miles was soaked. It wasn't something that could wait. Sorry. I'll be quick. Seeing this, Jessica offered. Grandpa, should I do it? But Nate's anger did not subside. I hated this about you. Eventually, he threw a box of tissues that was nearby in anger and stormed out. Maybe that's why it shouldn't have happened. A few months after our grandson came to visit, Nate asked me to invite Kristen over to our house. Kristen is a friend of mine, so they knew each other. But they were not supposed to be close. Wondering, yet thinking it might distract him, I invited Kristen over. Kristen readily agreed. And she came over at noon that day, where they both shocked me with the truth. We'd been dating for a month. Nate added insult to injury by saying, "So, Isabel, please break up with me." Nate was holding the divorce papers firmly in his hand, looking straight at me. It was blank, implying we should fill it out together. I moved Jessica and Miles to another room for the time being. They followed quietly, which was a relief. I didn't want them to sit through such a discussion. It's your fault. You lacked the consideration a wife should have, and that's why this happened. Nate argued that ever since we took the kids in, I stopped caring about my appearance. Plus, I always put the kids first, neglecting myself. He didn't like that. On the other hand, Kristen, who was divorced and single, always looked neat and perfect with her makeup. Her clothes were tasteful and beautiful. Above all, she impressed him by always putting him first whenever they met. Of course, Nate is struggling in such a situation. I understand how he feels. Kristen is the only one who cares about me that much. If I'm with you, you'll always be my priority. Love is all we need. I don't mind if we don't have money. I was disappointed with the two of them, openly criticizing me and praising each other after having an affair. So, what about Jessica and Miles? Am I supposed to raise them alone? Of course, Nate laughed. Those kids were a nuisance. Nate smirked and began filling out the divorce papers in front of me. Kristen, standing next to him, was beaming. Just when I thought Kristen had released the hand she had on Nate. She came closer to me and whispered, "I'm taking your rich husband." Frozen, I watched as Nate finished signing and slid the divorce papers and a pen towards me. Trembling, I signed the divorce papers. Look at her, shaking because she's losing her husband. They laughed as I managed to finish signing. Now I can marry Kristen. Yay! I'm so happy. I'll always be with Nate from now on. I silently watched as the two of them walked out arm in arm. I let the kids join us for the last goodbye. Then Jessica squeezed my hand tightly. When I looked at her, she had a sly smile. Good for you, Grandma. Because that person. She pointed at someone with her free hand, so I hurriedly stopped her. Then, I asked Jessica.
Jessica, how long have you known?
I've known for a while. I chuckled wryly, squatted down, and hugged Jessica and Miles. A month later, as I was locking the front door to go out with the kids, someone called out from behind. Hey! What's going on? Turning around, I saw Kristen standing there. But she looked odd. Kristen, who usually dressed up extravagantly, was wearing an old plain t-shirt and sweatpants today. Her makeup was on, but the eyeliner was crooked and the foundation was smudged. Her hair was partially tangled like a bird's nest, carelessly tied up in a ponytail. What's with you? You look completely different. I hesitantly asked the drastically changed Kristen, and she blushed. I don't want to dress like this. I managed to sneak out. It's all your man's fault, you know. I don't quite understand what you're saying. I thought he was rich when I married him. What's with that man? He's just a money pit. He won't buy me what I want, and yet he's so unnecessarily picky and selfish. As she spoke, it seemed Kristen reminded herself of her grievances, her face growing even redder with excitement. The kids, puzzled by her heated rant, kept their distance. I, too, subtly shielded the children from the blame. Weren't you the one who said it's okay as long as there's love? That we don't need money and you'd stick by me no matter what? That was obviously a lie. I mean, I could understand if he was handsome, but why would I willingly live with such an old man without any money? We quietly moved away from Kristen, who was screaming and spitting, and headed towards the car. Kristen continued to complain about Nate as she followed. As I unlocked the car, Jessica climbed into the back seat by herself. Miles still couldn't buckle his car seat properly, so I helped him. All set. Hey! Are you even listening? Isabel! Just as I closed the door, Kristen reached her breaking point and let out a hysterical scream. The proximity of her shrill voice made me wince. Stop yelling. You scared us. Well, you're not listening at all. Complaining to the person you stole from is just absurd. It felt like the voice in my heart was coming out into my mouth. I had to cough to compose myself. Before I said something I'd regret. You've been nothing but complaints. If you're so unhappy, why don't you just break up with him? That's... Kristen stumbled over her words. Seizing the moment, I tried to get into the driver's seat, but she quickly stopped me. Wait. You're his ex-wife, you know what he's like. Jealous, clingy. He says he'll follow me anywhere, or if we break up, he wants to disappear. I knew that. That's why, when Nate mentioned Kristen's name, I was a bit hopeful. Even Jessica seemed to realize I wanted to break up. Grandma, you're lucky. Because you hate that man, right? I was surprised when she said that. My trembling at the time wasn't because I was losing Nate. I was worried he might use any excuse to take the kids away. But that was an unfounded fear. To Nate, who was obsessed with Kristen, the kids were nothing but a nuisance. It was the same when Owen was born. Ignoring me, nearly neurotic from childcare, Nate blatantly cheated at work. And when confronted, he said without a hint of guilt, "It's Isabel's fault. You only care about that kid. Plus, you don't wear makeup or dress up anymore. Where did you throw away your womanhood?" That kid Nate referred to was Owen, who couldn't yet speak or stand. From that moment, I could never fully trust Nate again. As Owen grew and became less demanding, we had more time as a couple, but by then, my feelings had cooled. I didn't steal Nate, but seeing Kristen now reminds me of the past. Yeah, he's persistent, all right. Once he gets attached, it's trouble. But you know, it's just the beginning. Eh? When I said I wanted to break up, I wasn't allowed to leave the house. All contact with the outside world was forbidden. I was locked in a room, and he would lock the door from the outside. It was after giving birth. Nate, failing to play his role as a dad, made me declare I wanted a divorce. I thought he'd let me go easily, but he was more attached to me than I realized. Once he gets something, he doesn't want to let go. Even my late mother-in-law colluded with him, using Owen as leverage. Being a housewife then, I had no money or connections. I couldn't see a way out. So I made peace with it. His earning was good, at least. I don't think my decision was wrong. I told Kristen, who turned pale and trembled. Wait. So what's going to happen to me? Who knows? Weren't you going to pursue true love with him? Kristen shook her head. Don't joke. That's your man. Take responsibility. She lunged at me, but I dodged. Kristen, carried by her momentum, fell forward onto the ground. At that moment, I got into the driver's seat and quickly started the engine. Wait! Just a minute! I've been wanting to say this, but he's not my man anymore. He's your man, right? Let's make that clear. I said through the window and slowly moved the car. Kristen, who had gotten up, pressed against the rear seat window and tapped on it. Wait! Help me! Don't leave me behind! Just a minute! Then, Jessica, who had made eye contact with Kristen, cracked the window open a bit and smiled sweetly. Grandma's older friend? Nice to meet you. We're going to be busy, so sorry. Huh? Older? We're the same age. And nice to meet you. Wait. While Kristen was distracted by Jessica, I drove off. In the rearview mirror, I could see Kristen collapsing. Who was that grandma? When Miles asked Jessica, she tilted her head with a puzzled look. I don't know. Feels like I've seen her somewhere though. Then, the two of them started to play and laugh cheerfully. We'll be driving for a while, so you two should sleep. Okay, Jessica said, followed a beat later by Miles also lifting his hand and saying, Okay. I chuckled to myself, soothed by their presence. When we arrived at our destination, I checked my mobile phone and saw several missed calls. Given the situation, the caller was likely Kristen. Feeling annoyed, I checked the history, and the caller was someone unexpected. There was no way I was calling back now. In fact, I felt like blocking the number right then. I'll consider that after today's cleanup is done. I put the mobile phone back in my bag and woke up the sleeping pair in the back seat. Here we are. Wake up! Then I managed to calm a sleepy and grumpy Miles and a hungry and grumpy Jessica through bath and meal times. Feeling a bit relieved after brushing their teeth, Jessica declared, I'm tired, so I'm going to sleep. Good night. All right. Good night. Jessica yawned and comfortably made her way to the bedroom to sleep. Miles and I stopped by the bathroom before following Jessica. By the time we entered the room, Jessica was already snoring. Miles lay down and within 10 minutes, started breathing softly in sleep. Careful not to wake them, I slipped out of the futon and returned to the living room. Though I had been here a few times for cleaning since then, this house was still well kept and nice.
This is where the kids used to live.
I felt like crying. I managed to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. This was the house where Owen, Louise, Jessica, and Miles had lived. After the funeral, Nate and I had disagreed on what to do with this place. Louise's parents had already passed away, and there were no close relatives. So, the decision about this house was left to Nate and me. Without hesitation, Nate said, just sell it quickly. Maintaining a house costs money, regardless of whether someone is living in it or not. Don't waste money. It's pointless, was Nate's opinion. It was logical. Nate and I already had a place to live. At that point, what to do with Jessica and Miles hadn't been decided, but either way, they couldn't live in this house. Even if we kept it, it was too far from our house for regular maintenance. Nate's view was generally correct. I thought so. But on the other hand, thinking about the children made my judgment waver. They had suddenly lost their parents and had to live with grandparents they had barely met. Maybe keeping the house of memories could be a comfort to them. It might be self-satisfaction, but I thought if it were me, I'd at least want to keep the house. though Nate said that he always left the bothersome procedures to me. Whether to sell or keep it, he probably wouldn't notice. So, I decided to keep it until caught.
I never thought we'd end up living here so soon.
I murmured to myself when suddenly my mobile phone rang. Although it was far from the children's bedroom, I hastily grabbed it. Too hastily, I fumbled it. "Hey! Isabel! Hey!" Reluctantly, I answered to a familiar voice from the phone. With a sigh, I responded, "Yes." "Finally, you picked up. I've been calling you so many times. What have you been doing? It's none of your business anymore. I don't particularly have anything to talk to you about." I spoke indifferently, and Nate was at a loss for words. I had never been this cold to Nate before or after our marriage. So he must be surprised. Just as well, I hoped this would prompt him to hang up. I even wanted to hang up myself. However, Nate seemed to have more to say. He started talking at his own pace. "It's about Kristen. She's really gone downhill lately." Oh, really?" Unable to mention our encounter just a few hours ago, I simply humored him with a response. "Even if she looks young, an old woman is still an old woman. Without her makeup, she's not much to look at. If we're saying that, then you're an old man yourself. Criticizing others while being the same, what do you think about that?" I would never have said something like this before. But thinking I'd never see him again made it easy to speak my mind. I'd be lucky if he hung up in anger. I wanted to cut ties completely. "You've changed. What happened?" "I'm just tired." "So, what do you want?" "Surely, you didn't call your ex-wife in the middle of the night just to gloat? If so, that's annoying." "No! I have a good reason." "It's probably nothing significant. After everything I've been thinking, being with Kristen made me realize I always preferred Isabel." See, nothing significant. I couldn't even muster the energy to respond. Without hearing from me, Nate continued. "I talked about true love and all, but maybe meeting Kristen was a way to reaffirm my love for Isabel. I feel bad for Kristen, though." It was so absurd I was speechless. Nate, getting no response from me, indulged in his self-narrative for a while before finally noticing my silence and called out my name. "Hey! Isabel! Are you listening? Hey!" "Yes, I'm listening." Nate sounded relieved. "So, I was thinking, I'd like to get back together as soon as possible, maybe even meet tomorrow." "That's impossible." "Eh? Like attracts like. How could both Kristen and he be so self-centered? Do they think they're gods or something? It's as if they're mocking me. After all that drama, divorcing me, marrying my friend, and now you say this? Well, but that was... Do you remember the horrible things you said about the kids? You called your own grandchildren a nuisance. At that time, I felt lonely losing you to them, just... It sent shivers down my spine. Stop, it makes me sick. Anyway, I have no intention of seeing you again, let alone getting back together. Wait. Then, how am I supposed to? You have money, so you'll figure something out, right? Oh, but you should be aware that you're nearing retirement. If you continue like this, you'll definitely go bankrupt. Was there anything else I needed to say? I wouldn't talk to him again, so I had to say everything now. But nothing else came to mind. So, I wrapped it up. Well then, excuse me. Despite his many words, I quietly ended the call. The phone continued to ring after that, but I switched it to silent mode and quickly set it to block his number. Since we've moved, he surely won't be able to find me. He probably doesn't even remember Owen's house address. Given his pride, he likely won't bother contacting me again. Ah, that's refreshing. I stretched my arms wide and took a deep breath. Returning to the bedroom, I saw the angelic sleeping faces of Jessica and Miles.
Good night,
I whispered again and started preparing for bed. As for Kristen and Nate, they apparently didn't divorce and are still together. Kristen probably wants to escape but can't. Nate wouldn't let go of his woman until he finds the next one. In a way, if he finds another, he'd move on. Which thankfully allowed me to escape. I owe Kristen for that. Jessica and Miles seem to have opened up more to me lately. Especially Jessica, who has recently started to show anger and make demands towards me. When she burst out with, "I hate Grandma," it was a shock, but I could bear it, thinking it was a sign she trusted me enough to express her feelings. Indeed, she came back shortly after with teary eyes, saying,
"I lied earlier, I'm sorry."
Which was quite endearing. I wish Owen and the others could have shared these happy moments. Even now, the thought makes my heart ache. But more than that, I want to make sure these children can live comfortably and securely now. For that reason, I'm determined to try my best to live as long as possible.